I got a call last week from my mom asking me to come out and go through some paintings that had been stored at her house for honestly about 20 years or so. Most of these were student pieces. And I graduated in '04. And at the time, I didn't have a place to keep them. And so she held on to them. And she kept holding on to them until now when she needed me to come and pick them up. I recently went through a big move, and that also changed my relationship with the things I own and what I choose to kind of carry forward in my life. And so the idea of going and getting a bunch of portraits and figure studies from when I was still learning how to paint, uh, these don't hold sentimental value to me. They were really exercises, and it was like finding a box of old homework. It was like it got me to where I needed to go, but they weren't serving me anymore at this point. So I wasn't super excited about going through those. But I was surprised when I was looking through everything that it wasn't limited to just student work, that she actually had a bunch of pieces of mine from my early career. And I don't know why exactly that was the case, but I believe that when I first started working in illustration, I still didn't really have a good way to reproduce my own images. And so I would bring them to her studio and photograph them there. And then I suppose a lot of them ended up just getting left behind or just put away for safekeeping. And I lost track of them over time. And my illustration career, I feel like it really kind of got in a groove in about 2008. That's when most of these works are from. And from 2008 to the end of 2011, I was doing work that was very different from the work that I do now as far as the process and the look of it. They represent what I think of as kind of like the phase one work in my career. When I first started, I began building a portfolio, making illustration samples, and every artist needs a process. You need some method that you can follow, a roadmap that you start and do this and do this and do this, and eventually it's going to take you to a finished piece. And especially if you're an illustrator, you need some kind of predictable routine, or you just need a way that you can start here and end here and deliver what your client is expecting to see. And a process isn't something that an artist just has when they begin. It's something that you have to kind of learn and develop on your own over years of practice, is what eventually leads to you developing your own process and your own voice and style in your work. I didn't quite have that yet in 2008. I graduated school in 2004. I was doing work with galleries for a few years after I came out of school. And during that time, I was building my illustration portfolio. And in order to do that, I needed a process that was something that, again, something that I could reliably follow these steps to get to the finished paintings that I was trying to do. And the way any artist gets their first process, I believe, is they get it from one of their teachers. And I picked up the process that my mom and stepdad use in their illustrations, which was pencil, like a very tight kind of pencil drawing with an acrylic monochromatic underpainting over top of that, and then small brushes going in and painting the finished piece, like one area at a time, usually working the background and then doing usually doing the background first and then doing the focal areas, and doing it all with, again, small brushes, tight kind of polished render. And I was all about tight polished render when I was at that point in my career. I was a big fan of pre-Raphaelite painters. I was a big fan of hyperrealism. And so I was really interested in being able to do that stuff myself. And So when I started out, I took on the process that my folks had taught me that they were using. And then and really it's Boris's process. My mom actually over time has kind of moved off and evolved her own individual process, but she used Boris's for years, and I used that for the first few years of my career also. It was in 2012. I'd been doing this kind of series of personal work and still showing with galleries where I was experimenting with bolder brushstrokes, different surfaces, and things like that, which in 2012 led me to switch to the process that essentially is what I'm doing today. I mean, things always continue evolving and changing, but that big change happened in 2012 where I took this old process, put it away, and found something that felt a little bit more kind of natural to my own temperament and goals, which also continue changing and shifting over time. But pulling out these old works that were done with the more kind of like polished, meticulous, small brush method is really cool to see. Like there's definitely some stuff that I did very early on that I'm still really proud of. And so looking through those, I pulled out 10 pieces that I feel were interesting, noteworthy, definitely still work that I'm happy to show and have my name attached to, and that I think other people might enjoy. And so I'm going to tell you about the ones that I pulled out here. So this first one, this is actually a little bit later than a lot of the others. This is from 2010, and this is a piece I did for Tour.com called The Duel. Tour.com was a website. They just changed to a new name. I think it's called Reactor. I'm not sure. But in any case, back in 2010, I was commissioned by Irene Gallo to do a piece for a short story. And the story was about, I remember there was something to do with a stolen magic book and these two wizards like kind of having it out. And it was in a contemporary modern setting. And one of the cool things about Tour.com was that they let you do your pieces, at least at that time. I don't know if it's changed, but they let you do your pieces in whatever shape or format you wanted because it was online. And I think this was kind of a new thing at the time. The idea of, we don't have the rigid format of a book cover or something. These could be any shape, anything, whatever suits the piece. And I've always been a big fan of kind of like a cinematic aspect ratio. I think this is like a 1:2, which I really like. I've done a bunch of 1:2 paintings in my personal series, Ritual. And I think it's not often I get an opportunity to do a job for a client that's in that proportion. So definitely, I think that was one of the things that I was excited about here. And I think, of course, like I created a composition that suits that panoramic format with these two figures facing off with each other. I don't know. I think that the magic effects that I'm getting here, the color choices and the painting and everything, I just really happy with this one. And at the time, it was definitely something that was front page of the portfolio. Next piece I have here is called Footsteps in the Dark. This is from 2008, and this piece was never published. This was done as I believe as a portfolio sample, if I remember correctly. I remember that a friend of mine's band was touring, and they kind of crashed in my living room. And I remember shooting pictures of a couple of them before they got back on the road, because I was like, I want to do a painting that's kind of this like D&D-esque fantasy setting. And I think that I was going for like a book cover sample here, I'm pretty sure. And when I look at it now, I feel like I did not. This is not a book cover. This is more like an interior. It's a story beat. And I think it's an interesting one. I like it very much. It doesn't have that kind of like full encapsulation of the world and the novel that book covers tend to have. This feels a little bit more kind of quiet and intimate, and more about a dramatic moment that happens in the story. So still quite like this one. I think it's really cool. And again, these are the ones, I'm not showing you the ones that don't hold up, because there were definitely some of those, but these are the ones when I was going through and pulling work out, it's like, oh, I like this. This one was also 2008. This was for Pyre Books, as the cover for Mike Resnick's Stalking the Dragon, which was a sequel. I forget if the first book was called Stalking the Unicorn, maybe? I didn't do the first cover. Dan DeSantos did the first cover. And at that time in my career, especially when I was working in this more kind of like tight polish kind of style, I often would get picked up for covers. If Dan was working on a series and he wasn't available, he would sometimes suggest me. There was one time that he and I actually worked on a piece together, where I went and stayed at his house for a week, and I painted during the daytime and he painted at night. So yeah, this piece was a follow-up to a cover that he had done for the previous book. It's a painting of my brother, who's also an artist, Anthony Palumbo, with just this kind of silly, fun collection of animals and mythical creatures around him. And I don't know, it's just a fun piece. And then this piece was done as a book cover for Nightshade Books. This was from 2009. This is for a Sherlock Holmes anthology. I believe it was The Improbable Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. And I'm trying to remember the name of the artist. There was the kind of direction I had for this piece was, first of all, no deerstalker, Sherlock Holmes wearing a more kind of conventional hat. And then also in the style of, I think it was Grimshaw. There's a painter who did a lot of like London street scenes at night, like gas lamp lit scenes, which is where kind of the color palette for this piece came from. And I guess it was around the time that the Robert Downey Jr., Jude Law movie came out. Because I also kind of remember that being a conversation about like kind of look like them, but maybe not, maybe like look like their cousins or brothers or something. I don't know. But yeah, it was it's kind of like a fun little painting. I don't think I've ever painted Sherlock Holmes before or since. But it was always, I feel like Nightshade occasionally would give me these assignments that was riffing on some historical piece or in the style of some artist from 100 years ago. And so it was always kind of an interesting thing working on those pieces. It was almost like doing when you do like a master copy as a student, you're really kind of trying to understand the decisions made by this other painter and reproduce those. And so something like this, it was like looking at a lot of those Grimshaw paintings and really trying to kind of understand where he was coming from and how to get that look in an original composition. And this was right before I became an art director for Nightshade. So yeah, 2009. I think I didn't start working as an art director for them until maybe a year, maybe 2 years after that. I think 2010 might have been when I started. All right, I'm gonna reset for the second group. All right, and here's the rest. So starting over here, this was a comic book cover that I did, Buckaroo Banzai. I think the comic was called Buckaroo Banzai, the prequel. This was done for Moonstone Comics in 2008. Yeah. and super fun. I enjoy Buckaroo Banzai very much. I'm not like deeply immersed. I remember as a kid, I actually had like a Buckaroo Banzai headband that my dad had given me, and I remember watching the movie, but not really remembering it super well. And then when they pitched this assignment to me, asked if I was available for a Buckaroo Bonsai cover, I was like, yeah, that sounds super fun. Rewatched the movie again, and I was just like, whoa, I didn't remember 90% of this, and what a wild ride. and really fun. There's things about it that I really love. So yeah, it was just fun to get to do a piece based on a kind of like a cult classic like that. And I'm trying to remember any particular things that I forget what I think that originally Perfect Tommy might have been holding a gun, and then we switched it to a watermelon for the final piece, which was a very good note. Yeah, it's a fun piece, and I think one of the first opportunities I had to work with trying to capture like celebrity likenesses or something like that, doing something that was, I don't have access to these people or even decent photos of them. So, the budget on this project was next to nothing, but, it was really a good kind of learning experience. How do you make that work? This piece, one of the very first Magic the Gathering pieces that I ever did, also from 2008. This is Rockcaster Platoon for the Shards of Alara expansion, which was the first set that I worked on for Magic. I remember I was in the Bay Area for a couple of months in early 2008, and I remember working on this piece in this sublet bedroom that I found on Craigslist, where I was very cramped in there, and this brings up some very specific memories for me. But yeah, also definitely representing, I think, something that I ended up not doing a whole lot of in my future work, which is these kind of like anthropomorphic, these creature people. I don't feel like I do a whole lot of that, but again, I was really kind of committed to the piece and getting it right. And the shape of the figure in the front, this kind of like dynamic pose, slinging the rock, the red sling really kind of like pops, and then having more figures in the background kind of fading away with that atmospheric perspective. But really just all the little details and the costume design and everything. And honestly, like when I think about the circumstances that I was working under when I was painting in this kind of like makeshift space, I was definitely like very distracted with some stuff in my personal life at the time. And it's kind of like a wonder to me to look at this piece and be like, oh wow, still very happy with that. Jumping forward a bit, this is the most recent of all these pieces that I have in the group. This is from 2011, and this is an unpublished, I believe I did this, I'm fairly certain I did this as a sample to send to Marvel and then never sent it, which is kind of weird. Like, I've got another Marvel piece right here from 2 years earlier. I met one of their editors at a gallery show in New York and got to talking with him. And over time, they did send me a couple of assignments, which I'll talk about in a minute. But then the book I was working on got canceled, and just nothing really kind of ever happened after that. And I really wanted to do more work with them and get back into working with them. It's wonderful that the Marvel Masterpieces came along down the road. And at that point, I had just kind of moved on to doing other things with my career and didn't think of superheroes as really like a place for me. But, it was such a wonderful experience to be able to go back to that and really do so much with it. This piece was in the time in between those two things happening, of doing a couple of covers and then quite a number of years before Masterpieces, almost a decade, really. And so I wanted to do more work with them. I did this piece as a sample. I don't know why I didn't send it. I guess I felt like I wanted to do a few more and never got the opportunity to do them because I was busy with other work. Maybe I was just scared because they didn't follow up with me after that title got canceled, and I really probably should have pursued that more. I should have sent this piece in. So yeah, a painting of Hope Summers, really just a character portrait. And honestly, when I look at it, it is much more of a card type image than a comic cover type image, because it really is just that kind of like character portrait, as opposed to like storytelling piece or action piece or something like that. But I think it's a pretty cool one. It's the only time I've painted this character because she didn't show up in Masterpieces. So this piece, this was the cover that I did for Marvel. Actually, so I did two covers. This was the second one, on a book called Scar, Son of Hulk. I did covers number 13 and 14, and this is number 14. And I don't remember if this was the last issue. I think it might have gone a couple more issues after this, but those are the only two I ever did, and the book did not continue after that. And I remember I was so excited to get, when they wanted me to do a cover for them, and then it was this title that I was like, I've never heard of any of these characters. I don't know what this is. I still really gave it my all, but it definitely felt like an opportunity that kind of stalled out before it really got started. So this is one of only two, as of this moment, Marvel covers that I ever did. And again, I like it. I think it's cool. I don't know why they didn't call me back for more after this. And maybe it was just my fault for not being persistent, and just following. I was doing a lot of work with Magic and starting to get a lot more book cover work at the time, and maybe that just felt like a more natural path, because those clients were showing more interest. They definitely paid better. So who knows? But looking back and wondering what if, right? I don't know if I can show this one too much on YouTube, so I'll show you the back of this painting. Well, yeah, whatever. And then this last piece, this is from 2008, like so many others here. This is also an unpublished piece. Also, I guess the only other unpublished piece here was Footsteps in the Dark and the Hope Summers, and this one were all kind of like sample portfolio pieces. This was actually painted at a live event I was at. I was doing a demonstration. I was an artist guest at an event called Elf Fair, which took place in a castle in Utrecht, Holland, which was awesome. It was basically like a fantasy-themed Ren Fair that lasted for a weekend. People were dressed up in costume. Because it was in Europe, people were naturally speaking like all different languages walking around, dressed up as like fairies and goblins and things like that. It was amazing. And one of the things that I did while I was there was they had me set up in this chapel where I was working on this painting as just kind of a demo. But it wasn't the kind of demo where I was like engaging with people talking about what I was doing. I was just kind of like side stage working on this, while one of the organizers of the event was giving a presentation on mythical creatures. And I just remember I was sitting there painting this while he was talking about like different folklore about unicorns and werewolves and vampires and that kind of thing. Very unique, strange circumstances. And the painting itself is, you know, it's a pretty simple, this is kind of a follow-up to an earlier piece I did. In 2006, I did a painting called Sword of Legends, which I feel was really like my first kind of breakout piece. It was the first piece I ever got into Spectrum. It was really something where I think I kind of pushed myself more than I had previously in other work. And at that time, again, I was still very captivated with this like hyper-realist style. I was really into like pre-Raphaelite painters, you know, Waterhouse and folks like that, Alma Tadema. And I think that one of the things that drew me to that work was a lot of those paintings would celebrate all these different textures of like, you've got the, you know, the marble and the fabric drapery and metal and tile work, and you know, maybe usually in those paintings there was like some kind of like fur, like animal pelts or something, and then of course like skin tones and things like that. And the demonstration of skill in being able to do all of those things really impressed me at that time. And so I wanted to do some paintings that were kind of in that vein. And so this is taking that character from the Sword of Legends piece I did and doing basically like a follow-up, a simpler piece, but just kind of focusing on that same character. And it's a kind of interesting to me just to think of how, like at that time, there's not really a lot of story behind this piece, and it was really more about the decorative elements. And I was still so focused on learning the, getting my technique down, getting my chops, and story and message and things like that were not always front of mind when I was working. And it was a lot more about like, just again, that like being able to realistically portray these different surfaces, being able to create that illusion. And my priorities have shifted over time, but I think that's just how we evolve, you know. And so looking back at this, I think it's very emblematic of that mindset that I had at the time. And I can really see like I was having a lot of fun getting these like the marble walls and that kind of thing. And yeah. And it was the only time I've ever done a painting in a medieval church. But these are on my site, available. And yeah, any questions or comments, hit me up. Thanks so much.